Hello, friends of YouTube. Welcome back to Mike Reads the States. And today we're talking about HP Lovecraft for Rhode Island, the complete fiction. No, just kidding. We're not talking about his complete fiction. It's The Mountains of Madness. The major novella he wrote and published during his lifetime. Um, it's the longest work he published during his lifetime. So within this complete fiction is The Mountains of Madness, as well as another story that finally became the first story that I finished, and liked by H.P. Lovecraft, because I've had this complete fiction collection for years, and let me just tell you honestly, for as many times as I've tried to get into H.P. Lovecraft, because his ideas have always seemed very interesting. His influence is incredible, and you see it everywhere in film, in video games, and people who talk about like Cthulhu and the Elder Gods and the Ancient Ones. They don't even know that this comes from H.P. Lovecraft, but it's everywhere. Like I'm not everybody obviously, but some people. It's like you hear it. It's gotten into our whole culture through osmosis, and I don't know if that's a worldwide thing, but definitely in like the United States, in the entertainment industry, in the video game world. Movies like The Thing, Alien, and a plethora of video games. I won't even get into that, but so his influence being what it is, and his ideas being so interesting, I've tried to read many of his stories from here. I started chronologically, found that he's written a lot more bad stories than good, in my opinion. I found that I couldn't even get into a lot of his most famous works. I did finish Call of Cthulhu, but found it to be kind of a rather mediocre story. Um, a lot of his stories I would come up against like this sort of really closed-minded, ignorant, and frankly racist worldview, and also his it just sort of like I could only see the only kind of fear in his stories that I could see is fear of like being unimportant, which I feel like a lot of people are pretty used to these days as far as existential um, crisis goes. And also the fear of people um, who are different than him, different cultures and things like that. So in many ways, he's kind of, as a person, an antithesis to like what I'm doing with my whole Reading the World project, but at the same time, he's a very important author. I should mention too, I just don't care for his writing. The overwrought, adverby, just, you know, it just very little dialogue. Everything is this sort of like internal monologue of something terrible that's happened to a main character who you never really care about, and the story never really makes you care about another character in the story either. It's not about the characters, it's like all about the idea. And I don't know. It's weird. There's good ideas, but like you need more than that for a story, in my opinion. So that's enough of the negativity, because I did finally find stories that I liked by H.P. Lovecraft, which are The Color Out of Space was the first one I read in these past few days. That one finally hooked me. Because this time I didn't try going chronologically or anything. I just started with the ones that are like his most famous works. I looked at what are his most famous. I tried the Dunwich Horror. I tried Shadow over Innsmouth. I tried, a bunch of them. Rats in the Walls. I couldn't get into any of them. Music of Eric Zahn. Couldn't get into any of them until I hit Color Out of Space, and it was like just this cool, ahead of its time sci-fi concept. And just like Mountains of Madness, I'm left thinking like, wow, this was written before World War II in the 1930s, and it seems like it could be the basis for a film made in the 70s or the 80s. Really, I was really actually surprised how contemporary it felt, like truly surprised. Um, even though I kind of knew that's like Lovecraft's whole thing, that he was ahead of his time, and you know, pushed the whole cosmic. He created basically the whole cosmic horror um, genre. Although maybe that's debatable. But anyway, I won't get into that. I'll talk about Mountains of Madness now. So my experience reading Mountains of Madness, it's like it starts out as a really slow burn, which I like, and it starts out kind of very based in reality and believable. It's about an Antarctic expedition. This man's come back from an Antarctic expedition, and he's writing this about his experiences in order to try to dissuade other Antarctic expeditions from going. And I was captivated. And just like in Color Out of Space, finally there were some characters that I could get to know and care about in the story. You know, you have the geologist, the biologist, and the engineer, and it's like none of these characters are really deep. Uh, Danforth, I think, is another one. None of these characters are like really deep or go through like a whole lot of development, but there's just enough there at least to make me care. Like the same way you care about the relatable characters in a horror film, you need like a little bit of backstory and dialogue and engagement between them, right? Um, some people criticize, like in the beginning, like when they find this biological creature that shouldn't exist. I mean, they're using this bore rig, this high-tech bore rig, to go into the Antarctic soil, and this should be old rock, you know, like they shouldn't be finding any large organisms here, but they find one. And in this whole section where like this the biologist Lake is minutely describing all of the workings of this creature, was like, that was so much better than your typical Lovecraft story, that it was this undescribable thing, right? And I like that Lovecraft actually tries to describe it. Those I think are his best stories. Color Out of Space and uh, in Mountains of Madness, he actually puts a lot of effort into describing what the character is seeing and perceiving, and the when they find like the ruins of the city. That's about as far as I'll go with spoilers before warning you. So like from this point on, I'm just saying, if you've never read H.P. Lovecraft, my personal recommendation: read Color Out of Space, read The Mountains of Madness, and those two books, those two stories in any order, and you can skip the rest. That's for me as far as H.P. Lovecraft is concerned. Those are the two stories that were really ahead of their time and really, I think, pushed the horror genre forward in a way that nobody else had. So that's my straight up, you know, at the Mountains of Madness, what makes it good? It's the build up, the mystery. There's good characters, and it's an exciting adventure. It's got all of the elements of a good novel, a good science fiction horror mystery novel. It's a touch of that archaeology too. You know, I don't have any book in the Reading the World series that deals with Antarctica, so this is almost like as close as I'm going to get to having a book for Antarctica, although this is the Antarctica of the imagination of the 1920s and 30s, when it was still really being explored and fully discovered. Um, but you can also feel the passion of H.P. Lovecraft in this story for Antarctica, and you know, all of the research he did as a child, and like this is finally, instead of this story, Mountains of Madness, and this is a key difference. I think Color Out of Space too. Instead of being things that about things that H.P. Lovecraft hated or feared or abhorred, these uh, these stories are about things he was actually passionate about and interested in. The stars, the you know, in Color Out of Space, the um, Antarctic expeditions. These are things he passionately actually came from a place. If the man had any place of love in his heart, if Lovecraft had a place of love in his heart, it was for Antarctica and I believe the stars in space. But that's just my conjecture. I just do feel a type of passion in this story that I don't in his other works. Not just for for the story itself, but the characters and everything happening around it, the uncovery, and it synthesizes all this stuff from his other stories that were like unfinished ideas into one big, beautiful idea. And I can't say any more than that without spoiling. So if you do want to check out the book, uh, eh, please look up Mountains of Madness and read it. Um, but yeah, it's so as Lake or when Lake and his party are disappear, and our narrator and I believe it's Danforth. I might be getting that name wrong, but the two of them basically go and try to figure out what's going on. That's when the horror really starts to like, it dawns on you because Lake's not responding, and it's such a great like this really feels like a good horror movie setup. They find the party just decimated. Um, the strange way that the bodies of different what we all of course who have read this story know are alien organisms, but this idea of like that these aliens came to Earth in the pre-Cambrian and like very early geological eras of the Earth, created humanity and so on, and yet even they are afraid of something. Even they have unnameable horrors that they face, and the revelation that these aliens are just men, in quotation marks, people like us, is it kind of like the story has these several layers of your mind expands further and further as the story goes on, and that's something I never experienced in the other stories of Lovecraft. It really like this is the one that I'm like, okay, there's more to this, right? And I don't know how deep it is, but like to me, it felt pretty deep reading it, and a lot of and by deep I mean profound, like to make you think about your place in the universe and what's possible, and there's this sort of yeah, I don't know. The physical Antarctica in this book disappears at one point and becomes a sort of psychological Antarctica, especially when they start talking about mountains that are like higher than Mount Everest. And then even when they go up to these and find this alien city uh, that was built by these creatures from the stars in the earliest epochs of Earth, um, there's like there's higher mountains even than that on the horizon that these creatures are afraid of whatever's up there. Something beyond even the darkness that we could imagine of the Shoggoths and so on. And the Shoggoths, man, the Shoggoths really threw me for a loop. That was yeah, I mean when that happened, it's like I knew I was reading a masterful work of fiction when that was all explained. And I guess it's all explained in very they find these writings like this whole alien civilization is basically carved in stone the history of their people, and it at first it might seem unrealistic that they're able to like just deduce all this history from all these stone carvings and understand exactly what it means. But if you think about it, they're showing a very highly advanced civilization here, a truly highly advanced civilization that wanted their words to be remembered by future generations or known by other species that could not even conceive of their language. Carving is the way to do it. Symbols is the way to do it. Pictures. And these pictures are even described in this sort of dimensional way with such intricacy that these creatures are able to, the old ones, I guess, are able to draw. It's kind of believable to me. Like if you're going to conceive of a truly highly advanced civilization, they're going to create something this detailed that can be understood by a reasonably intelligent being that finds it. And when Lovecraft is just kind of this exposition of this whole history of the earth, of mankind, of the different other alien creatures that come, of which Cthulhu is part of which the what is it, Yogmi or something, like, I don't know, or Miyo, I can't remember what they're called, but yeah, so like there's all these other warring groups of aliens, and it gets so complex. and and it feels like Lovecraft is having fun with this too, which is enjoyable. So yeah, again, I mean, it's profound on a certain level, but like many of Lovecraft's work are complex without being deep. They're ornate without having any real takeaway meaning or anything, at least for me. But this one actually had all of that ornateness, that intricateness of Lovecraft, and I was able, and I actually for once felt like his style of writing fit the story, and it was tempered, and it was focused around building this construction. The writing itself seemed to mirror the ancient civilization that the characters in the story were uncovering. And so that's another reason I liked it. Uh, yeah, so at the Mountains of Madness, finally a work along with Color Out of Space, two works that I can appreciate by H.P. Lovecraft and finally kind of start to understand the influence. And I do truly wonder that if without these two stories specifically, H.P. Lovecraft would have the influence that he's had, particularly Mountains of Madness. I actually think the importance of Mountains of Madness is highly underrated, as far as being really the work that holds all of his other work together as something that transcends his own time. And I say that because I don't feel his other work is that forward looking. I don't feel his other work sufficiently, um, puts forth or advances the type of writing that he was doing. It didn't make itself distinct enough from, say, Lord Byron or Poe or his influences. Like, it was distinct, it was different, but I think this sort of like mind blowing science fiction leap forward really comes from At the Mountains of Madness. So I don't think I need to go over long. I don't know how much more there is to analyze about this story. I finally did really enjoy something by Lovecraft, but then kind of coming, and I was even gonna consider saying a few more profound things and that I thought I might have gotten out of it, but really it's kind of this just very exciting, thrilling, uh, chilling, archaeological cosmic horror romp through Antarctica, and worth reading again, but maybe not a book that needs to be like analyzed in the same way you analyze quote unquote great literature, right? But I don't know. I'm still kind of debating on that one. Really, I'm not sure. Is Mountains of Madness great literature? Is it should it be like canonical on the level of the great works of fiction of the past? I don't know. I don't know. Does it matter? I don't know either. So yeah, that's Mountains of Madness and Rhode Island done. As I've moved back to continuing Machado de Assis, uh, um, the posthumous memoirs of Bras Cubas, I'm reminded at how, like, what is the difference between a book that really moves you on an emotional and psychological level versus kind of the more intellectual fascination I have for H.P. Lovecraft. And it was not actually too different than the feeling of intellectual interest I had while reading Clarice Lispector. Although Clarice Lispector, I do feel, gave me a little bit more of an emotional punch at the end, whereas Lovecraft was just sort of like an, oh, that's cool, kind of a more nerdy way, but not like I don't, Lovecraft has never really made me like feel a strong emotion, if that makes sense. It's more just kind of, I don't know, intellectual interest. So, and that's why I kept trying to understand him and persevered until reading Color Out of Space and finally reading Mountains of Madness. And the last thing I'm going to say is if you still got to this end of the video and you haven't read Lovecraft, you can start with those two that I mentioned. But yeah, don't listen to people who say that you should save Mountains of Madness until last, like I did, because that was almost my mistake, and I almost didn't get to experience what I think is actually a great work of fiction, because for me, HP Lovecraft has a lot more bad fiction than good fiction, but those two that I really like. So sometimes there's authors like that for you, you know? And that's a good lesson to take out of it, I guess. So this has gotten overwrought, just like the prose of Mr. Howard P. Lovecraft. So with that, I will leave you and have a great day and take care.